Brooke was a beautiful young girl who grew up in a happy and loving family. One day her father gave her an unusual gift, a little crow chick. By raising him, Brooke learned responsibility. Unfortunately, one day the girl died for unknown reasons. During her funeral, a raven sat on the coffin, and that's when something incredible happened. Brooke was only 6 years old, but she was strong, beautiful, and independent. She loved spending time in the garden, looking at plants and insects. She ran, jumped, and played among the trees, scratched her knees, and generally had fun spending her childhood. Living in a small village in the UK, life was slow and quiet. Brooke's mother stayed at home to look after the house and her child, and her father was a sailor who often spent weeks and sometimes even months at sea. Brooke missed him very much, and was always glad when her father returned. She not only spent time with her father, but also loved the strange and wonderful gifts he brought her. Over the past few years, he has brought her seashells from a Caribbean beach, exotic sculptures from some Middle Eastern country, as well as books and toys from all over Europe and America. Brooke stood impatiently at the gate, waiting for her father to walk down the street. This time he was away for 2 months and was due to return home at any moment. Suddenly she saw her father walking slowly down the street. Brooke screamed with joy and ran to him, throwing herself into his arms. She hugged him tightly and kissed him on the cheek. But she noticed something. There was no gift. Usually Dad would immediately hand her something in a gift box, but not this time. That's when he knelt down and put something in her hand. She jumped slightly when she felt something twitch in her palm, looked down and saw a tiny baby bird. Her father told her that it was a little crow. He asked her to protect and take care of her like a real human child. Brooke was embarrassed, but her face brightened when she realized how much responsibility lay on her shoulders. Over the next few weeks, Brooke spent all her time with Raven. She fed him, gave him a drink, and even taught him a few tricks. Crows are very intelligent birds, and her pet quickly realized what the little girl was trying to teach him. The chick also began to grow and learned to fly in a few weeks. Brooke carried him outside and watched with adoration as he soared in the sky. He could easily fly away and never return, but he always found his way to his mistress. It was clear that there was a pretty strong bond between the girl and the bird. But one day a tragedy happened. While in the garden, lying under a large tree, Brooke suddenly stopped breathing and clutched at her throat. The raven began to scream loudly, and after a few minutes Brooke's parents came to the window to see what was going on. When they saw their daughter lying on the ground, they ran outside and grabbed her. Ignoring the raven, they pushed the girl into the car and took her to the nearest hospital. Raven sat in a tree and watched their car drive away. Upon arriving at the hospital, doctors quickly began checking Brooke's lungs. Such a young and healthy girl shouldn't have any breathing problems, so it was important that they did a lung scan to make sure there were no problems. There was practically no time, as lack of oxygen could cause serious and irreparable damage. All this time, her parents watched with tears in their eyes. Despite the doctor's best efforts, unfortunately, Brooke was pronounced dead. At this time, the raven was sitting outside the window of the hospital room and continued to knock, but the staff decided to drive it away. There is no place for such a bird in a hospital. He couldn't be let in, even if it was a pet. When Brooke's parents were driving home, the raven pecked their car, making a lot of noise again. Stricken with grief, people ignored him. As soon as they returned home and began to prepare for the funeral, Raven continued to try to get their attention. But they didn't have time for that. The day of Brooke's funeral soon arrived. Her parents, relatives and friends mourned the little girl lying motionless in her small coffin. The lid was open so that people could say goodbye. In the coffin, she looked so fragile and innocent, as if she were some kind of precious porcelain doll. Many people cried as they passed Brooke, stroked her face and kissed her on the cheek. The raven was sitting in a nearby tree and watching what was happening. From time to time, he flew up and circled over the crowd, making a loud sound. Brooke's parents held their breath when the raven finally came down and sat on the coffin, looking curiously at the body of its owner. Suddenly, the bird began to make a strange buzzing sound, as if asking a question. She jumped back and forth from the lid to the edge of the coffin, and then back again. After a few minutes, the bird began pecking at Brooke's body, as if trying to wake her up. Brooke's parents were touched to see such a sight and, although they understood that Raven must have felt his form of grief, they knew that he could not stay there, pecking at the girl. They tried to yell at him, but he wouldn't budge and even started pecking at her mouth. This behavior looked like a disgrace to the family, but hid a secret motive that everyone was going to discover. Approaching the open coffin, the father waved his hands to scare away the bird. The raven flapped its wings and screamed, but reluctantly took off and flew to the nearest tree, gazing down. Everyone was watching the raven as he took the short cut, but when everyone focused on the coffin, they froze. Brooke was sitting. There was an apple the size of a walnut in her lap. It got stuck in her throat after falling from the tree under which the girl was lying in the garden. When she was rushed to the hospital, doctors assumed that the problem was related to her lungs, so they checked her only with a chest X-ray, which showed nothing. They didn't think to check the throat. The lack of oxygen sent her into a coma and she was mistakenly pronounced dead, despite still being able to take slow and shallow breaths. Brooke looked at her mother and father, who rushed at her, hugging and kissing her. Their daughter was alive. Shocked, they realized that Raven had known about this from the very beginning. He tried many times to get this message to Brooke's parents, but they didn't understand, and the bird pecking at Brooke's face and mouth was his way of removing the blockage itself. Fortunately, the bird had enough time to save Brooke's life. Dear viewers, if you liked this story, be sure to put your finger up and share this story with your friends. If this is your first time on this channel and you haven't subscribed to it yet, I recommend subscribing right now so you don't miss another exciting story.